What you know, alibis? Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. It's Tuesday, April 29th, day 6 of the Karen Reed trial in the books, and it was a big day. The last witness of the day was Jennifer McCabe, still on the stand. She'll be back up tomorrow for direct exam. But first, we're going to wrap up Ian Whiffin's testimony. Yesterday, he was on the stand most of the day talking about phone activity, location data, text messages, calls, and all that jazz. I'm not going to dive too in depth in the cross exam and the redirect because it was very lengthy, but we are going to hit the important parts. The defense was back up, and the witness said the device arrived outside 34 Fairview at 12:24 and 38 seconds, where it remained static for about 30 seconds. In the witness's March 2025 report, it states at 12:35 and 30 seconds, the device bearing shifts to a westerly direction, as location records also show the device moving west from the roadside towards the house. The defense asks if he put that in the timeline because it's important. The witness said he did not due to the declining accuracy, but the defense says it's important enough for you to put it in your report, and the witness says yes. In another section of that 2025 report, it says based on the device location and bearing, it does appear the device started to move towards the house. However, since the bearing information appears based on the location records rather than the direction the device is facing, it's difficult to say to any degree of certainty if the device actually moved. They move on to the health events at 12:31 and 56 seconds. That begins the 36 steps health event, which is roughly 84 feet. In your report, you wrote the device began moving for 20 seconds, and the witness says yes. Is it possible the device was moving towards the house? Yes. You saw the weather conditions and being inside a building could contribute to the low accuracy? The witness says yes. The defense, and the first reason you gave is the device could be in a building or covered area like a house or garage, like 34 Fairview, because that's a building. Yes. Defense, 12:38 and 18 seconds. The data center's on a location slightly closer to the house than the roadside. They pull up a graphic with a radius that includes a lot of the house. You didn't include that depiction in your timeline that you discussed with the jury yesterday, but it was important enough for you to put in your report, and the witness says correct. The defense points out in the report, it says over the course of the next few hours, the GPS coordinates and the associated accuracy radius jumps around numerous times between the house and the road. Yes. Defense. Do you know the distance from the flagpole to the front door was 72 feet? And the witness says maybe. And he acknowledges the 36 steps could have extended into the house. The defense points out that the first couple of calls from Jim McCabe are answered, but calls from Karen that started at 12:33 were unanswered, and the witness agrees. They move on to the search on Jen McCabe's phone, how long to dying cold. That was at 2:27 and 40 seconds. Yesterday, the witness testified it was essentially a bogus timestamp, and the search happened that next morning. But the defense asked if the witness had an issue with the hash value of McCabe's phone data in a December 2024 report. The witness said he didn't do the extraction himself, so he couldn't validate that was an original hash and that it hadn't been modified. He also acknowledges he does not know the chain of custody for Jen's phone. The defense asked if Celebrite removed the timestamp of that search. No. He wanted to elaborate, but the defense cut him off and didn't let him. The defense says one of the Celebrite tools shows the 2:27 a.m. timestamp, but it doesn't exist anymore. The witness agrees the timestamp is gone. The defense points out a competitor of Celebrite showed the timestamp and still does, and says Celebrite outright removed the timestamp because of the first trial. The witness said that was done by him and his research, and it was verified by a forensic research group. The witness has used Axiom to analyze Jen's phone and verifies that the 2:27 a.m. timestamp does still appear on that program. The defense points out that the phone is seen moving at 1 mile an hour, and a person walking at a normal pace could be moving at that speed, and the witness said that sounds reasonable. As far as deleting the data from Jim McCabe's cell phone, the witness said yesterday that deletion occurred after January 31st, 2022, but he couldn't determine how the deletion occurred. And there were several ways that could have happened, including user deletion and system triggered. The witness said, I have an idea of how it occurred, but I have not been able to replicate it. Therefore, he has doubts about how the deletion happened. At this point, the Commonwealth gets back up and says the report is the witness's work and he doesn't work for one side or the other. The witness says there is no scientific dispute about the nature of the 2:27 a.m. timestamp, and his research on this has been confirmed. He did not change the software to help law enforcement in this case, and any tampering would have been detected and would destroy the reputation of Celebrite. That was it for that witness. And next up was Jennifer McCabe. They go through her family history. She has 4 daughters. She met John O'Keefe when her 3rd daughter was in kindergarten and met John's niece. She helped John with his niece. The kids would have play dates. They would do sport pickup and drop offs together, sleepovers. And she said they got closer over the years. Sometimes he would come hang out, have a beer, talk about life. January 28th, 2022, in the early morning, they all knew, obviously, a blizzard was coming and that Saturday events would be canceled, including sports. That afternoon, her daughter was having a team dinner at the house, so the witness set that up and then went out with friends before going to a basketball game. After the game, she drove her daughter home, and her sister texted they were going to Waterfall. Among the people that Jen saw when she got there around 9 was Julie and Chris Albert, her niece. She said a short time later, Brian Albert and Brian Higgins joined them there at Waterfall. She had met Brian Higgins through Brian Albert. They weren't really friends, but she knew who he was. While at Waterfall, Jen said she maybe had 2 or 3 drinks, but didn't feel any effects from the alcohol. They stayed there from around 9 to midnight. She said the mood was very light. Brian Albert Jr., her nephew, had his birthday that day, but he was not there. John and Chris Albert had made plans to meet up, so Karen and John joined them around 11 p.m. Jen said she was happy to see the both of them. John walked over to where she was. Karen walked to the other end. For Karen, she would see her on days where they would have a little pool party for the kids, and John told her Karen had MS, which Jennifer does too. She said she liked Karen immediately, and it was nice to have somebody her age going through the same thing. They would see each other at parties, sports pickups, Halloween parties, but she didn't spend any time with Karen without John around. She did spend time with Karen at Waterfall that night. They bring in surveillance from Waterfall, and Jen points out where Karen is in the frame. You see them taking a shot, and shortly after, there was a discussion about hanging out afterwards. Karen wanted to go to a pizza place that was owned by Chris Albert. But before Brian Albert left, he said he was going home to have a beer with Brian Jr. and invited everyone to come. Jennifer decided to go, and she said everybody seemed on board with that plan. After those plans were made, Jen left about 5 or 10 minutes later. She knew Karen and John were planning on coming, as well as Brian Higgins and her niece. She also spoke to John and Karen outside Waterfall. And when they left, Jennifer was driving. By the time they got to her sister's house, it had started snowing lightly, and it was beginning to accumulate. They get there and go in the house. There are 2 women there, Julie and Sarah. She said she wasn't really friends with Julie, although at one point Julie did watch her dog in the past. She was given a White Claw and took a sip or 2, but really didn't want another drink. She had spoken to John about coming over and was expecting them. John texted her where to, and since they were driving, she just went ahead and called them. John had never been to that residence before, and the conversation was quick. John called her back again, just trying to find the house. She told John to go by Bella's house, and then it's down the street. The witness said Bella is friends with John's niece and her own daughter. She said inside the house, they were laughing, they were listening to music. They play a video that's essentially a family joke, and it involves the song It's Raining Men. Her sister would get drunk and bring out an umbrella and dance to that song. She said there was no drama, and she looked outside the front door and saw Karen's SUV, but could not see who was inside the car. At this point, it's dark and it's snowing. She didn't see the car move, but did see it change locations a few times. She doesn't know how many times she looked out, but the first time she saw the car, it was straight out from the front door, another time near the flagpole, and then further up from the flagpole. She was sitting at the table and somebody mentioned there was someone outside. So she got up and looked, and then she sat back down. When she saw the car, she texted John, "Here," with a question mark. She texted again after seeing the car move locations towards that flagpole. That's when she texted, "Pull behind me." John did not respond to that. She texted him again, but at the same time, she realized the car was gone. The Commonwealth asks if when she saw the car at the flagpole, did she go speak with John? And she said, "Why would I? I had no reason to." They ended up staying there on Fairview until about 1:30, 1:45. Nobody else came to the house. Brian Higgins left first, then them. There was no fighting, no arguing, and no physical altercations that night. She walked out the front door and the snow and wind had picked up, so she said she kind of curled up and ran to her car. When they left, they were dropping off Julie and Sarah. And she said Julie and Sarah were teasing her because she had bread and peanut butter in her car. She explains she had her niece that weekend and they were going back and forth to games. And instead of going the fast food route, she brought food for her niece. As they leave 34 Fairview, she says she's kind of turned around looking at Julie and Sarah in the backseat and they're talking. She didn't see or hear anything. They dropped Julie off first, then Sarah, and then Jen and her husband go home. Once they got home, Jen goes to bed. Her husband makes a snack and then comes up to bed. They stay up and she uses her iPhone. She texted a few people and did some Google searches. The first search was a basketball game report from a game her daughter had played in. And the other search, her daughter had an offer to play on a basketball team. So she was looking up the basketball club. She put her phone down and went to sleep. Her phone rang at 4:53 a.m. and it was John's niece. She heard a lot of very loud screaming in the background, and that was Karen screaming Jen's name and screaming John didn't come home. Jen's husband shot up in the bed thinking that one of their kids had come into the room screaming. She said John's niece sounded concerned and uneasy. Karen told the witness her and John had been in a fight and she left him at Waterfall. Jen said she wanted to help her, so she went into mom mode, thinking of ways she could help Karen. She thought if Karen did leave him at Waterfall, she was trying to think of who was still there and how they could help. She knew Chris Albert was still out there and thought maybe the two went to Chris's house together. She called Chris's wife but didn't get an answer. At this point, her husband reminds her they had seen John and Karen outside the house on Fairview, and she remembered seeing the SUV as well as the texts and calls she had with John. She kind of explained the medicine she takes for her MS makes it a little hard to wake up, so it took a minute for her to be fully awake and start to comprehend what they were talking about. Jen called Kaylee back because she did not have Karen's number. And while she was speaking to Kaylee, she heard screaming from Karen in the background. After Jen told Karen they were at Fairview, Karen said she couldn't remember being there and then started to say, "Did I hit him? Could I have hit him?" Jen said Karen also said she cracked her taillight the night before, but at the time it really didn't have any significance to Jen when Karen said that. At some point, Jen's thinking if Karen left him there, where was he? Because he never came into the house, so where would he be? There was a friend of John's who was supposed to meet with them out at the bar. She thought maybe they got into a fight and John got out of the car and maybe he connected with his friend who's Tom Beatty. She knew Tom was at a party a street over And she did call, but did not get an answer. She also tried calling her sister as well as John O'Keefe. Karen shows up at her house and she said she knew because she could hear her screaming outside. At this point, it's around 5:20 or 5:30 in the morning. Jen said at this point, she really was not worried about John, and personally, she wasn't screaming. She did not know Carrie, but had seen her once with John about 7 years earlier when, as a thank you for helping with his niece and nephew, he had a discount at Reebok and he took them to the store together and then they later went to lunch. She says at the time of all of this, she and Carrie were not friends at all. Back to that morning, Karen is screaming, "We have to go to Fairview. Could I have hit him? Did I hit him?" And Jen said she was just on repeat. Jen's husband told Karen to shut up because she was going to wake up the neighbors. The weather was whiteout conditions and it was dark. Jen was planning to drive Karen, and there was a car stopped just at the base of the driveway, and that was Carrie Roberts. There was a snowplow coming up the road, so Carrie had to move the car. Jen got into a car with Karen, who was in the passenger seat. Karen was still on Bluetooth talking to Carrie. Jen heard Karen say she wanted to go to Fairview, but Carrie said, "No, we're not driving around in this weather in two cars, so let's go to John's to see if he's there." Karen screaming, Carrie is telling her to shut up. Jen said Carrie was the one who took charge that morning, and she was just going along with Carrie. When they left, Carrie and Karen were following Jen, and the drive took about 5 or 6 minutes to get to John's house. But on the drive, Karen was screaming and yelling. She repeated herself a lot, and she was quite hysterical. She was also asking repeatedly, "Did I hit him?" They go to John's and pull into the driveway, and then they go inside. She mentions John was a stickler for people taking their shoes off before coming in his house. She did, and says Karen did not, and she thought that was strange. They looked around the bottom and second floors, and then Jen went in to check on his niece. She was in bed holding onto her phone, and she was terrified. Jen told her they would find him and everything would be okay. At this point, they go back outside, and then this is when she says Karen showed them her cracked taillight. Jen thought she showed them when they were going inside, but realizes now it was when they were leaving to go to Fairview to look for John. She said the taillight was missing pieces, and Carrie's demeanor at that point was just frustrated with Karen. Carrie was the one who pointed out that piece of metal sticking out. She was worried somebody might catch their clothes on it. They decided to all take Carrie's car to go look for John, and Carrie decided, let's go to Fairview. And Jen said that decision was almost like to shut Karen up. At this point, the mood is getting tense with Karen's constant screaming and Carrie trying to drive in the snowy conditions. Karen was repeating things over and over. Jen and Carrie were in the front seat. Karen was sitting in the back middle, but was peeking her head through between them. Jen said while they were on the way, she was looking out the window to see if she could see anything. She said, "I know it sounds crazy, but I was looking for John." She could see the side of the road from the car. She says Karen was not looking outside. She would scream, sit back, get quiet, and then start again. It took about 10 minutes to make that drive to Fairview. And when they were about 20 or 30 yards away from the house, Karen asked if John could be cheating on her and with Bella's mom. Carrie said, "Do you think he could have walked to this other woman's house who he had previously dated, who lived the next street over?" At this point, Jen is pointing out to Carrie where the house is. They're driving near the flagpole area, and Karen is screaming, "There he is, let me out." Jen and Carrie were looking, but didn't see anything except for snow. Carrie stopped the car. Karen was kicking the door, wanting to get out, and Jen was just wondering what's going on. Karen gets out, and Carrie looks at Jen and says she is bat crap crazy. Jen gets out, still doesn't see anything in that flagpole area, so she goes over to where Carrie and Karen are standing. Once she got close, she could see Carrie was wiping snow off of John's face. Karen lifted her shirt and John's shirt and was laying on him. Carrie was screaming at Karen, "Get off of him." Jen said John just looked frozen. She was in shock, and her and Carrie made eye contact. And Jen said in that moment, she knew John was dead. She starts to call 911, and at this point, Carrie and Karen are screaming, so she walks back towards Carrie's car. Carrie told her to get blankets and towels from the back of the car. She talks to the 911 dispatcher. After that, she went back over to where John was. Carrie asked her to take over compressions, and Karen was doing mouth to mouth. As far as doing the compressions on John, she said it felt very funny and not normal. She can't describe how it felt when she was trying to press down, but it was resistance. She did compressions until the police came. This is where the judge ended it for today. They had that hearing about the ARCA evidence. The judge will allow that testimony, and they are expected to testify. There is no way John O'Keefe was hit by Karen's SUV. And that ended day 6. Tomorrow should be a very interesting day because at some point, Jen McCabe will be on cross. I do expect a lot of fireworks. So come join us and watch live starting at 9 a.m. on YouTube. And again, tomorrow night, I'll recap the day's testimony in an hour or less. That is it for today. Hope you guys have a good rest of your evening. We will see you soon.